Topic. It's every topic is good, but this is a very important topic. It's something that really happens. At least the first part really happens all the time. Um, we started touching upon this last time we learned last week, but I think we didn't get through the whole thing. So we're going to do it today. We're on page 199, volume 11, Tzurba Rabbanan. We're dealing with a hilchot tefillah b'tzibur, praying in a tzibur. The first thing we have to know. We have to define what a tzibur is. We know you have to daven in a minyan, means you have to have 10 people. But then we say tefillah b'tzibur. What does it mean, tefillah b'tzibur? What is that halachic definition? So Tzurba Rabbanan first brings down from the Chai Adam. The Chai Adam says as follows: the ikar tefillah b'tzibur hu tefillat yudchet. This
What
is
page?
Shemonei Esrei, on page 199. 199 of Yosef. Please turn to the right page. Huh? Make believe that you. Okay, so Vikrat Tefillah Tzibur Tefillah Tidches the Hainu Shitpalu Asara Noshim Shehem Gedolim Biyachad. It has to be 10 people davening together. Shemonei Esrei. So you need Tefillah Tzibur at Shemonei Esrei. Chai Adam says you need 10 people. The Hainu Shitpalu Asara Anoshim Shehem Gedolim Biyachad. 10 adult males who are praying together. V'loi Kimo Shechoshvin Hamon Sheikar Leitpalel Ba'asara. Who rak mishum l'shmoy kalish v'gushu baruch hu v'lechein eino makpidim v'lehitpalel b'yachad rak she'yud b'beit knesset v'hu ta'ut gadol. And he said it's a big mistake if someone thinks he's praying in a tzibur if there's just 10 people there. In order for tefillah b'tzibur to be, has to be 10 people starting Shemonei Esrei at the same time. That's the way the Chaya Adam is saying what tefillah b'tzibur is. The tefillah in tzibur is 10 people starting at the same time, and therefore he says v'lechein chovel Adam. Therefore, it's important on a person. He should come to Beit Knesset early. So he should start Shemonei Esrei with the Shliach Tzibur. This way he should daven normally. He started bracha, the parsha tamid and karbanos. You say the karbanos that's instead of the karbanos that we usually would say. And this is what a person has to do. And so when you're praying with a tzibur, you're not allowed to start your Shemonei Esrei before them. Like Chai Adam says, because you want to start 10 people together. We're gonna deal with that shortly. Even outside, you shouldn't go outside of the Knesset to daven separately. Unless he's a chayla oynish, or if the tzibur is taking too long by singing songs, and he's scared, then he's allowed to start. And if such a case that he's worried that they're not going to pray at the right time, better for him to go home. So we have our first definition of a tzibur. This is from the Chai Adam. Chai Adam's definition of a praying in a tzibur is that everyone is praying at the exact same time. It must be 10 adult males praying at the same time, starting Shemonei Esrei at the same time. That's the Chai Adam. Let's look at the Mishnah Brura. Mishnah Brura said, the ikar tefillah b'tzibur hu tefillat yudches. The hain shval asar anoshim shehem gedolim b'yachad. He's saying the same thing as the Chai Adam. 10 people together, starting Shemonei Esrei. Lo k'moy shechoshvin hamon sheikol yitpal b'asar hu rak l'shmoy kadosh kusho v'baruch hu v'lechein ein makdim rak she'yud b'knesset v'zotarot v'lechein choyv al adam l'mayil v'knesset kadei she'yigil yitpal yudches b'tzibur. So the Mishnah Brura pretty much verbatim quotes the Chai Adam, and he says, in order to go tefillah b'tzibur, you need to have 10 adult males starting Shemonei Esrei at the same time. The only issue with this is the Mishnah Brura and Simon Samach Tet. Simon Samach Tet deals with what's known as Parish al Shema, which really is based on a Gemara in Masechta Brachot, where if there was people were davening and there was no minyan, and then someone came later and they made a minyan. That's one way to learn by the way the Gemara is whether they were there and they didn't have a minyan, or they all came from home, they prayed at home, and then they came to the shul. That's another way to learn the Gemara. However, whatever Parish Shema is, this is something that you've seen in practice if you daven in a Sephardic shul. You've seen someone come in late for mincha. He goes up and he starts saying, he says the Amanai Sevatai Tiftach, he says Baruch Atah, he says Nagdishach, but everyone says Ata Kodesh, right? He's the only one davening. He's saying Nagdishach out loud, Ata Kodesh, and then he goes quiet afterwards. This is coming from the din of a Paris al Shema, which means you can say Devarim Sheb Kedusha, something that's holy, with 10 people. You don't need a minyan to do that. One person is enough to say Nagdishach. Although the Chamabaji held one person is enough to say titkabal. I mean, the person. Here's the classic example that Yaakov Joseph brings down. Here I'll actually where's Simon Samach Taz. I'll read to you what he actually says, which is a pretty interesting halacha. People will look at it weird because we don't do it as often because again we're very influenced by our Ashkenazic brothers. But if you take a look over here, then the Paris al Shema, he says as follows. I'm looking in the Yalka Joseph. This is on Simon Samachtet. He says, Mishaloit vel Arvit. Someone who didn't pray Arvit, Yachol Amod Pnei Teva in Tisha Shekvar Hitpalalu. One person didn't pray Arvit. Right? Same would apply to Shachrit, to Mincha. One person didn't pray Arvit, and everyone else prayed. He can go up. Yachol Omer Chati Kaddish Baruch B'Kol Ram. He can say Chati Kaddish. Say V'Hu Rachum Chati Amonai Tzivot. Right? And say Kaddish. Say V'Hu Rachum. Say Baruch Hu. He can say Yitkadal before the Amida. You're davening, you one person davening, but 9 people already davening there in the shul. This is what he's saying. One person didn't daven, 9 people did. He can get up, he can say Kaddish, Baruch Hu, Kaddish before Shemonei Esrei, V'gam Yochel Emer Kaddish V'gam V'af Kaddish Titkaba. It says, but it's not considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. Okay? So it's everything. Right. So what I'm trying to say here, in order to do Devarim Shib B'Kedusha, you need to have 10 males. Okay? But in order to daven Tefillah B'Tzibur, the way the Chai Adam is learning, you need to have 10 people davening at the same time. So the difference, what we want to say Tefillah B'Tzibur and Tefillah B'Minyan. So 6, 7. That's what we're going to be dealing with next. Okay. They say, 6 people davening, 7 people davening. Whether that's a Tzibur or not, that's another way to define Tzibur. So let's get it straight. Chai Adam said Tzibur is 10, and we already saw stuff to say that are holy stuff that you need 10 people. You just need one person who needs to be davening, and the other people, of those 9 there, they can say everything, right? But the Mishnah Berurah in Simon Samach says, in source 18 in our Shir on page 200, Avakashiyesh Roiv Minyan, if you have a robe of a minyan that didn't pray yet, Hem Kemot Tzibur Gomer. The Mishnah Berurah and Simach Samach Test says that as long as you have a rove of a tzibur, if you need 10, what's the majority of 10? What's the 6? As long as you have 6 people, Mishnah Berurah here says it's considered a tzibur gomer. So now we have a steer in the Mishnah Berurah. We have the Mishnah Berurah and Simon Tzaddik, right? In Simon Tzaddik he says, like the Chai Adam, you need 10 people for a tzibur. And here in Simon Samach Tes, he says you only need a row. So how do we come to understand this? There are different ways to understanding this. Let's take a look at the Igros Moshe over here, or Moshe Feinstein. So here in the before we start Moshe Feinstein, Igros Moshe, look before he says in here in the orange box, one explanation given is that the true intent of Mishnah Berurah is Simon 90. Simon Tzaddik like ours, you need 10. As long as 10 is present, only 6 must be recited at the time, according to this comment in 69. So he brings others that hold this way as well. That what he's trying to say is that you need 10 people, but only 6 need to daven. That's the way they want to learn what the Mishnah Berurah really meant. However, let's take a look at Igros Moshe. He says as follows. We'll take a look at the bold words because we don't have all day to go through the whole thing. He says, "Hine bedavar ma'alat tefillah b'tzibur sheshma she'amarti shu dafka kishchol asar mitpalin v'lo yisagber minin hu ha'emet." He says, when Moshe Feinstein held that when davening Shemonei Esrei, you need to have 10 people starting. Chen mefurish gam b'chai adam. This is also what the Chai Adam says. So we have the Chai Adam, we have the Mishnah Berurah and Simon Tzaddik that also says this, and now you have Moshe Feinstein that says, in order to have a minyan, a tzibur praying the tzibur, you need to have 10 people. So he says very simple. He says the reason why you can't say a majority of the tzibur is a tzibur, because when you have measurements, you cannot say a majority is a measurement. Just think for a second. Imagine you're making a cake, right? And you need to have measurements, right? And it's a very specific cake. If you don't have enough the right thing, it's not going to taste right. And the guy says, okay, I need 12 eggs, but I have 7. You're missing 5 eggs. The cake's not going to come out the same. You need to have You need to have exact measurements. So Moshe Feinstein says, when it comes to making a tzibur, it says you need 10. You cannot tell me a majority of 10 is enough. You need 10, right? He said the same thing is when you're saying something holy, right? Like the Paris al Shema, one person is davening, right? You still need 10 people there. You can't say I have 8 people, I'm going to daven whatever I want to daven because I have a majority of the minyan. It doesn't work. You need to have a minimum number. The minimum number for a minyan is 10. The minimum number for a tzibur, to pray in a tzibur, considered communal prayer, is 10. That's what Moshe Feinstein wants to say. The minimum shear of a minyan is 10, and the minimum shear of a tzibur is 10. Therefore, you always need 10. And the Zer Shayach, so he says, now, when do we say rubo kukulo? When do we say 6 is enough? B'hanidun rak kemat tzrichin layot mechayivim be'emet davar kedusha kedei she'yochel la'omer the im kvar nifter ein yochel af shesh kan tzibur v'zeh shayach din rubo kukulo shekivan sha'roiv mechayivin either kemar shekulan chayivim yochel la'omer. This issue here about how many, in order to say kiddusha. So this Paris al Shema, which we said, the only one person and 9 people, one person is davening and 9 people already daven, and they can answer to him, seems to be a manchoket. Not everyone agrees to this. So that's probably why we don't see the Ashkenazim doing this. They would say you need to have at least 6 people who didn't daven in order to say Dvarim Shebek Kedusha. If you already had only one person who didn't daven, can't do this. Now, I've seen Hasidim do this. I have never seen yeshivish people do it, but I have seen Hasidim also do Paris al Shema. One person do the Shemonei Esrei out loud and do his Nagdisha. I haven't seen by the yeshivish Olam that they do this. So Moshe Feinstein seems to be saying that in order to do Dvarim Shebek Kedusha, you need to have 6, and you need to have a minyan, but you need to have 6 who didn't daven, and that's when you have the Indian of Ruba Kukula. Okay, so far let's review what we have before we move on to the next opinion. We have the Chai Adam says Tefillah b'Tzibur is when you have 10 people davening at the same time. Shemonei Esrei. Mishnah Berurah repeated from the Chai Adam, word for word. 10 people starting Shemonei Esrei. We had a Mishnah Berurah in Simon Samech Test that said you need only Ruba Kukulo. So we wanted to say, no, really he held you really need 6 people who are not davening, but that's what he really held. Moshe Feinstein held that no, you always need 10. Tefillah b'Tzibur is 10. A minyan is 10. But if some people didn't daven and some people did, then as long as you have 6, you can say everything. Okay? And it wouldn't be considered, according to that opinion, you continue on that track, it wouldn't be considered a tefillah b'tzibur. It could be tefillah b'minyan. Wouldn't be a tefillah b'tzibur when you have 6, according to the Rebbe Moshe Feinstein and the Chai Adam are learning. Now we're going to take a look at the Minchat Yitzchak from Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss. We're on page 202. And he says, Soif Davar, Gam Laniot Dati, Nira Kemoshe Katuv Kavod Torato, Af Vishisha Mitpalim Levad, Tzurba Dal She'en Mitpalim Nichshav Tefillah b'Tzibur. So here we have the Minchat Yitzchak. And Minchat Yitzchak says, if you have 6 people who didn't daven, and 4 people already daven, or you have 6 people who are starting Shemonei Esrei together, and 4 people who are not, same idea, that is considered Tefillah b'Tzibur, considered a communal prayer, which you want to get. That's a very important thing. So we have Minchat Yitzchak that says that way. But then the Minchat Yitzchak brings down, and the next sif, he says, Emnum b'nogay le'inin l'chatchila, but he says in the best way, Kata b'sefer lekata kemach, yesh lahachmer d'lo have tefillah b'tzibur, that it's not considered tzibur, v'chei nira la'alocha yesh lahachmer l'tefillah hechi d'efshar, av'lo efshar nira, the way we said it. So he's saying as follows. He's saying, the Minchat Yitzchak says, l'chatchila, if you want a tefillah b'tzibur, you should have 10 people praying at the same time Shemonei Esrei. However, when it's not possible and you have 6 or 7 that are praying together, that is already considered tefillah b'tzibur. Okay, he finds support for this by the Rambam. It's source 22 in the Tzurba, on page 202. And the Rambam says, what is considered a communal prayer? One person is praying aloud and everyone is answering. You need to have 10 free adult males. The Shiach Tzibur echad mehem, and the Shiach Tzibur is one of them, one of the 10. And even if some of them already daven, the Yotzu Yidei Chovatan, and they already prayed, and they already did their obligation, Mashlimin lehem la'asara. The Hushayo Roiv ha'asar shlo yitpalu. And they can be counted as long as they're in the minority, which means 4, and they can be counted as a minion. And and to do any of those other things, you need to have 10 people. So the Rambam says that it is considered Tefillah B'Tzibur if a minority already prayed and a majority is praying now. So we have 2 sides of the opinion of what it means a communal prayer. We had the Chai Adam, Mishnah Berurah in one simon, as well as Rav Moshe Feinstein, is that in order to be considered a communal prayer, 10 people must start praying Shemonei Esrei together. Minhat Yitzchak, Rambam seems to be saying that as long as you have 6 people who are praying together and there's a minion in the place, or 10 people total, the 6 people who are starting together, that is already considered a tzibur. Let's look at from Rav Chaim, Chidush Rav Chaim Halevi, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. What is he says? Hadin de Paris al Shema. Remember I told you about Paris al Shema? One person is davening, everyone else already davened, or everyone davened privately, and now they have a minion. Now the 10th guy walked in. Din Paris Shema, the Shitas Rashi, who Baruch Hu B'Kriyat Shema B'Kedusha. You don't need 10 people who didn't daven. And when the Chazan comes and says now the out loud prayer, that's considered the Tefillah B'Tzibur. We're going to see there's 2 dinim of communal group prayer. There's the silent Shemonei Esrei when 10 people pray together. It's called the Tefillah B'Tzibur. It's called the communal prayer. And we're going to see that when the Chazan repeats it, it has another, it's a little lower status, but it's also considered communal prayer. The Hainish Achar Mitpala, the Ashar Shomim, the Einu Tzarech Shel Kula Mechoyevim, Eloroiv Mechoyevim, Sagi. But when they're praying in the beginning, you need to have 10. But the Chemesh Ashar Kulam Shomim is Ehu Tfilotam Dai Berov. But Tfilah B'Lachash, so Chaim Soloveitchik wants to come and he wants to kind of make a compromise. He says when you start the quiet Shemonei Esrei, you need to have 10. You need to have 10 when starting the quiet Shemonei Esrei. 10 people who are davening together. Shemonei Esrei. 10 people who are davening, starting Shemonei Esrei together. But when you're doing the repetition of the Shemonei Esrei, according to Chaim Soloveitchik, then you would only need 6 people who are ready to answer. Okay, that's his kind of compromise. Like you have the Chai Adam, you need 10 to start, but he says for repetition, you only need 6 who can answer to start, as long as there's a minion present. What is our din lehalacha for us? Let's take a look what I put over here. Let's see over here. What did I put? Simon. What did I do with this one? Simon Samach test again. We put as follows. What did I put this one here? Okay, this we already talked about. This is Paris Al Shema. This is not what I wanted to bring. I didn't bring it down anywhere else. Okay, so we have, it's actually on the next page. I'm sorry. Page 204. Page 204 in the Tzurba Rabbanan Volume 11, we're dealing with Tefillah Tzibur. Yalka Joseph says, "Hamitpalin b'minyan sheyesh bo shisha or shiva anoshim shemitpalin b'yachad v'hayeter shemistarfim hitpalu kvar." You had 6 people who are not, 6 people who are davening now, and you've had 4 people who already daven. Afal pikein nichshavat tfilatam tfilah b'tzibur. So according to the Yalkut Yosef, 6 people who didn't daven yet, or 6 people who are starting Shemonei Esrei, is already considered a tfilah b'tzibur. Rashayim gam loimer chazara im kedusha uberkat kohanim. They can say everything. Sharov haminyan kikulo, because the majority of the minyan is like a total And it's as if all 10 people are davening together. So Yalka Joseph says, you have a minyan, 10 people, and only 6 people are starting Shemonei Esrei together. That is already considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. V'yesh Aimrim, he says then there are some people who say, some authorities who hold you need to have all 10 starting together. Like the Chayodem, Mishnah Berurah, Moshe Feinstein. But if it's going to cause bittul Torah, you're waiting for a minyan, you can't get to the Seder on time, then you shouldn't do it. So he says even more, this is a very interesting point here. He says, even if you don't do the repetition, you don't have time to do the repetition of Shemonei Esrei. You don't have time to do that. But 10 people did Shemonei Esrei quietly together, that is also considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. Because Tefillah B'Tzibur is not repetition. That's another form of Tefillah B'Tzibur. But Tefillah B'Tzibur means people davening together. Okay? So, to review in summary this part of the shir, is we have three real opinions here. We have Chayadam, Moshe Feinstein, Mishnah Berurah. You need to have 10 people starting Shemonei Esrei together to be considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. We had on the other side, we have the Minchat Yitzchak. We had support from the Rambam, and now the Yalkut Yosef that says 6 people starting Shemonei Esrei together. That is also considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. It's better to have 10 if you could, but 6 is also considered Tefillah B'Tzibur, and you shouldn't wait for 10. If it's going to cause bittul Torah, just go with the 6. Okay. We also came out on the side. We spoke about the repetition of Shemonei Esrei is also considered Tefillah B'Tzibur in some degree, which we're going to be doing next. And we also came out with what's Paris al Shema, which is one person who didn't daven yet, and 9 people who already daven. He can say Kaddish, he can say Kedusha, he can say Baruch Hu, if everyone is willing to answer to him. And he's one person who didn't daven yet. He can even say Kaddish Titkabah. That's what we came out from this part. Now we're going to be dealing with the next part of Tefillah B'Tzibur. I come in late to shul. This is another famous thing a lot of Sfardim do. We come in late to shul. So what do? We start with the Hazan together, right? What would be the reason to do that? No, Rabbi Yosef, what would be the reason to do that? To start with the Hazan together? The person came late. What would be the reason to start with the Hazan together? Very good. We just said that when the Chazan is repeating it, it has some degree of Tefillah B'Tzibur. So if you can start with him, that would be ideal. This way it could be considered somewhat of a Tefillah B'Tzibur. So start off, Masechta Berachot, Daf Chaf Alef, Amud Beit, Amar Rav Huna. Hanichnas LeBeit HaKnesset, the Motzei Tzibur Shemitpalel. You walk into the Beit HaKnesset and you found that the Tzibur was davening. Im Yachol Hitchil V'Ligmar. Actually, Gil Shel Tzibur L'Moedim Hitpalel. A lot of people don't know this. Halacha is that when the Tzibur is making modim, everyone has to say modim with the Tzibur. Halacha also is, in order to do modim derabbanan, you cannot be sitting and just go like that. He also says you have to be standing and bow. You cannot be from a sitting position. So if you know that you're going to start davening, you cannot say modim with the Tzibur, you shouldn't really be starting to daven. That's what the Gemara says. So if you know you could finish before they get the modim, yitzpalo. Ve'im lav al yitzpalo. Rabbi Shimon Levi Omer, im yochel etchiv ligmor ad shelo yagia shel tzibur kedusha. If you can start your Shemonei Esrei before the repetition, before they get to Nagdishach, yitpalel, then you should daven. Ve'im lav al yitpalel. Because Nagdishach and modim has to be done with a tzibur. So if you're not going to get to that way, you're not going to be able to answer with them, then you shouldn't daven at that point. Okay? Let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam writes, "Hanichlas lebeit haKnesset u'motzat tzibur shemitpalin b'lachash." You find them davening quietly. A person should say modim together with the tzibur and nagdishach together with the tzibur. So if you cannot finish your Shemonei Esrei before they get to modim as a tzibur, then you shouldn't really start. That's what the Gemara said. Let's take a look at the Rambam. Rambam says, you find the people davening quietly. If you can start and end before Nagdishach, then you should start your Shemonei Esrei. And if not, Yematin, then you should wait. leitpalel b'kol ram. This whole thing comes from the Rambam. The Rambam says, if you know that you're nagdishach, you're not going to be able to say nagdishach with them if you start Shemonei Esrei. They're up to, let's say you walk in, they're up to Modim. You start Shemonei Esrei, you're not going to get to nagdishach on time. So the Rambam says, wait. Yamtin Tzibur leitpalel b'kol ram. Wait for him to start. Amonai siftai tiftach. Veitpalel imoy belachash mila b'mila. Pray with him word for word until he gets to kedusha, till he gets to nagdishach. V'onah kedusha and answer kedusha ima tzibur umitpal shal tefillah atzma. And then he can pray the rest of the Shemonei Esrei by himself. That's what the Rambam says. So the Rambam is giving us an answer. The Rambam says you have to do nagdishach together with the tzibur, right? But you can't start Shemonei Esrei because you're not going to be able to answer it. So what say you should do? Wait till the chazan starts Shemonei Esrei. This way, you're like the chazan davening together with him. So it's like a tefillah b'tzibur, and you can answer nagdishach. That's what we pretty much do. So here in the orange box, they bring down from the Rambam that at least with kedusha, one should say the amida word for word with the chazan, and it's considered davening in tzibur. He brings here. This is also the opinion of Tosafot, as well as the opinion of the Rosh. You're going to see in note 18, this is brought down from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, as well as the Yalkut Yosef also brings this down. Let's say I have 8 people davening, the chazan, and the 10th person, that's 9, and the 10th person is the person who's going to be davening together with the chazan. Are they considered 10 or not? He says yes, he can be considered part of the minyan, even though he's praying like the chazan together. It's considered part of it. Let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch, source 27. If one began to pray with the Shliach Tzibur, when you come to Nagdishach, you say with him, Mila b'mila kol kedusha kamoshu omer. You say the whole Nagdishach like he says. Meaning when the Chazan says Nagdishach v'na'aritzach, that person who's davening with him says it with him, those words. He doesn't say it when the Tzibur answers it, but he says it as if he's the Chazan. V'chein yomer imo birkat ha'el kadosh u'birkat shomea tefillah, and he should say the birkat shomea tefillah, which right away the gam yichavin kishagia she'ach tzibur l'moedim yigia gam hu l'moedim. And when he gets to moedim, the she'ach tzibur, he should also be at moedim. Ola tov shemchal l'chan el adot. Same thing with tov shemchal adot. Kedei shesicha im she'ach tzibur b'moedim. So he should be together with the she'ach tzibur b'moedim. So we see here, Shulchan Aruch says clear. He says very clear. When you come in late, you're davening with the Shliach Tzibur. You get to Nagdishach with the Shliach Tzibur. The brachas in between, if you want to do it word for word, good. You don't have to. But when you get to Modim, again, you have to do it with the Shliach Tzibur.
And just finish before him and do again Modim together.
If you could do that, you could. You could do that because then you're doing Modim with the Tzibur again. The issue would be if you're not doing Modim with the Tzibur. So there's 2 ways to do Modim with the Tzibur. But how are you praying faster than the Hazan? He's saying word for word. I mean, unless he's stretching. Until the but you shouldn't. You should be like him, really. When you do him, you should be like him. The way I was told to do it by my father, he said, if you're coming in late in davening, you should daven word for word with the Shliach Tzibur from the beginning to end. That only difficult will be if you're davening by an Ashkenaz minion. And you can't really say word for word because you have the Sephardic nusach. What you should try to do is to get to the bracha at the same time as they are. You're in between whatever, and then bracha get time. But the main thing is that Nagdishach has to be said with the Tzibur, and Modim has to be said with the Tzibur. Many people do not know this halacha. They just come in, they say Shemonei Esrei, they miss Modim, it's Nagdishach. They think they daven with Tzibur. They didn't daven with Tzibur. They didn't do anything. Okay? So it's important to know this. Now,
Robert?
Yes.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Yitzchak. Sure.
Let's say the minyan is already praying Amidah, and you came in late, you don't even have tefillin on yet, or you put on your tefillin. Should you say Shema Yisrael and then wait for them to say Nagdishah, or do you pray Shemonei Esrei with them?
We're not doing this halacha today, but you are on a good point because it is related to this. And the truth is, you really want to make tefillah b'tzibur. The whole point of davening in a shul with a minyan is not just to pray in a minyan; it's to pray Shemonei Esrei with 10 people together. That is the whole reason why we go to shul. That is it. That tefillah b'tzibur is praying Shemonei Esrei together. So in such a case, we're going to learn the halachot is that there are things that you should skip in order to get to Shemonei Esrei together. or at least to daven with the Shliach Tzibur who's repeating it, at least to get to that point, so you'll be able to repeat word to word for him. That is the ideal, and that is the way each person is supposed to daven. I know you'll see people come in late, they start davening on their own, and like they might answer, but then they're not, they didn't do tefillah b'tzibur. Maybe it's considered tefillah b'minyan, davening with 10 people in the same room, but not considered tefillah b'tzibur. And that's two different degrees of prayer. Okay, the main prayer is praying 10 people together, Shemonei Esrei.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, the Ramah says a person comes in late. The Ramah has a different opinion. And this is what you'll see a lot of Ashkenazim do. He says if you come in late, this is what Ashkenazim, a lot of them do. They come in late, don't start Shemonei Esrei. Wait for him to say Nagdishach, answer Nagdishach, and after he finishes El HaKadosh, then you should start. But if he needs to do it quick because he doesn't have time, then or Kedei L'Smach Gula Tefillah, in order to make Geula L'Tefillah, Dinei Hachi, then he can do what the Shulchan Aruch says. So the Ramah, for the Ashkenazim, they argue a little bit with the Shulchan Aruch, and they say, let him answer Nagdishach like a person who's answering, rather than praying word for word. The only time word for word, according to the Ramah, is when it's he doesn't have time to start Shemonei Esrei after Nagdishach. It'll take him too long. So then he can start with the Chazan. According to the Ramah, seems to be, I don't see how he would do that, because if you're starting later, then you're gonna miss it. It seems not. Yeah, it seems not. The actual Bet Yosef says the main thing is Nagdishach should be said with the Tzibur. Moedim was like a plus. All right, the Gemara brought down two opinions, and they're going to say that the halacha is like Rishub and Levi, that it's Nagdishach that's the most important part, not Modim. But you saw the Shulchan Aruch kind of brought it down. The Modim should be done as well as the Tzibur. And yeah, Yochanan, you're probably right. According to the Ramah, he doesn't bring down anything about Modim. Seems not to be worried about us saying Modim together. Okay. When the Mishnah Berurah just wants to clarify the Shulchan Aruch, when he said word for word, it means he should say Nagdishach, and the Ashkenazim, they don't say Atzah Kadosh, the Chazan doesn't say Ashkenazim, they say Lador Vador, so he brings down Lador Vador, Adha El Kadosh, then he prays by himself. And if he can finish before they get to Shemaya Tefillah. He's saying, so he's kind of getting into the Modim part in Mishnah Berurah. He said you should finish Shemonei Tefillah if you can do it before the Chazan. Uvetana Tzibur lo yom Shliach Tzibur anenu. So now I'm davening with the Shliach Tzibur together. It's a Tana Tzibur. The Shliach Tzibur is going to say anenu as a separate bracha towards the beginning of the Shemonei Esrei. We who pray privately, we say anenu in Shemaya Tefillah. So, but now I'm praying together with the Chazan. Am I actually the Chazan, and I should say another bracha in my Shemonei Esrei? Or should I say it in Shemonei Tefillah like a private citizen? You're right, but to clarify it, he says you pray Lo Yom Shliach Tzibur Anenu. You don't say Anenu with the Shliach Tzibur. You say it like a Yachid in Shemaya Tefillah. Okay. He says the bracha of Modim and Kedusha Yechavim b'shtei brachot elu l'sayim Shliach Tzibur. She finished the bracha Shemaya Tefillah, Retzeh, and El HaKadosh together. V'yachad v'az ein tzarech to la'aniyat elu ha'aminim k'mo Shliach Tzibur b'atzmoi. And he not need to concern himself with answering Amen, because he's like the Chazan himself. Okay, now just a moment here. He's going to bring now the Yalkut Yosef regarding the prayer that some of us have seen, especially in yeshiva or in camp time, is when they do, or we've seen Friday nights, a lot of people I've seen doing this in Queens, where they do the short Shemonei Esrei. What do they mean? The Chazan starts up to Nagdishach El Kadosh, everyone answers, then the Chazan goes quietly, then everyone starts Shemonei Esrei themselves. What? It's not good to do that way. But let's see what he's trying to bring from the Yalkut Yosef. Yes.
It's almost sunset and the mincha time is almost up. I mean, so I've seen the Millennium do it.
So there's more of a reason. There's more than a reason to permit it. if it's closer to sunset. However, do know that we're allowed to pray mincha up to 13.5 seasonal minutes after Shkia, which today is almost about 20 minutes after Shkia.
That's what I'm saying, including that 13 minutes.
If you're ready in that
minutes.
time and now you started, that would be a permission. But we're going to see it's not the way I mentioned how to do it. That's what Ashkenazim do. One person starts it out loud, and then everyone starts after Nagdisha. The Yalkut Yosef says that's not the way to make that type of Shemonei Esrei. He says the way you're supposed to do that, I was going to do it inside, we'll tell it outside first. The Yalkut Yosef says in order to make what's known as Hechi Kedusha, everybody starts with the Hazan. The Hazan goes loud, and everyone starts with him. So you have 10 people there, 20 people there. Hazan says, Tiftach out loud, and everyone is saying it word for word quietly. Nobody answers Amen. He says Nagdishach out loud. They all say it with him. They say Ha'el HaKadosh, and then they go quiet. Because the whole point is the real Tefillah Tzibur is when 10 people are praying together. If one person starts, it's only one person davening. Even though we said repetition is somewhat of a Tefillah Tzibur, it's not the real Tefillah Tzibur. So Yalkut Yosef says, and it's based on other opinions as well, is that you need to have 10 people, everyone starting at the same time. And he says nobody has to answer Amen Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. That's not needed for Tefillah B'Tzibur. Rather, you need 10 people starting together. Many people don't know this, but this is the farish in the Yalkut Yosef. I was once at an Emet organization event, and they had the Sephardic rabbis there, and they said, "Oh, we're running out of time." First of all, they had about a half hour for mincha. They said they're running out of time. They have to make a shortened Shemonei Esrei. And they did it the way the Ashkenazim did it. So I said, I pray with them. I'm not going to fight with them. But afterwards, I came over to the rabbi and I said, you know that the Yalkut Yosef doesn't say to do it this way. He said, no, it can't be. I said, okay. So we were in a shul. I pulled out the sefer. I showed it to him. And he was like, oh, man, I never knew this. And I said, yeah, most people don't know this, but this is what it says. That's not the right way to do it, the way the Ashkenazim do it for us. All right. But let's take a look what he wants to bring down over here. He says as follows. When there's not enough time and the Sheikh Tzibur is saying one Shemonei Esrei out loud, they should say word for word. They should say no answering back and forth. Everyone says Nagdishach together. And then you do the part after El Kadosh, you continue quietly. That's how to do a shortened Shemonei Esrei repetition. Everyone starts together. Now, there's nobody answering Amen. There's nothing to worry about. Amen doesn't make a difference here. Why? This is better than what other people do. But people wait, like the Ashkenazim do, is that they wait until they finish El Kadosh, and then everyone starts Shemonei Esrei. And the appropriate way for Sfardim is like he mentioned first, that everyone starts together. And the idea behind it is that when everyone is starting together, that is Tefillah B'Tzibur. You need 10 people davening together. Even if you didn't repeat Shemonei Esrei at all, 10 people davening quietly together, that is Tefillah B'Tzibur. 10 people praying together, not the repetition. And that's what he's trying to get through over here. I did bring down a couple of things that I wanted to look straight up over here. Simon 268. Is this the one? Right here. 68. Oh, let's go in the back. Yeah. Hold on. Okay. What is this? I meant 228. Hold on a second. Just give me 1 second. Let me see what I wanted to bring down. I'm not sure what I wanted to bring out here. Maybe I'm in 218. Yeah. All right, fine. I wrote something here, but I'm not able to find the page right now. All right, fine. So what did we come out with up until this point? We were saying that we should pray Shemonei Esrei with the Hazan, right? When you pray with the Hazan, it's as if you're doing a tefillah b'tzibur. The Yalkut Yosef brought down, and then we had the Ramah who said, no, wait for the Shemonei Esrei to get to Nagdishach, the Shasir to get to Nagdishach, and then start your Shemonei Esrei. And now I bring down the Yalkut Yosef that shows you should never do that. You should always start together with the Hazan, because that is better. Summarize, page 208, the orange box on top. To summarize, it seems that the guidelines for one who begins Shemonei Esrei later than the Tzibur are as follows. If one can conclude his Santa Mida before the Chazan reaches Kedusha, in the Chazar Shashatz, he should begin right away, while the Tzibur is still reciting Amida. So if he walks in, they just started Shemonei Esrei. He walks in when they just started. You can get up to Nagdishah before they start. No problem. You should do it. If you cannot conclude so quickly, then it's a machloket. Ramah and Shulchan Aruch. Ramah says, wait for them to say Nagdishach, stay Nagdishach with them, and then start Shemoneh Esrei. Shulchan Aruch said, you start with them. Although Ashkenazim usually follow the Ramah, in this case, some poskim rule, even some Ashkenazim may follow the approach of the Shulchan Aruch if there is a need to begin sooner. That's what the Ramah said. The Khatam Sofer appears to disagree with the entire understanding that we have so far. In his opinion, reciting the silent Amidah together with the Hazan is actually the best way of tefillah b'tzibur. Okay, so this is even more perplexing now. Okay, so we had opinion number one that you should Shulchan Aruch, you should daven with the Chazan together. Opinion number two, the Ramah, say Nagdishach, then start Shemoneh Esrei. Now you're going to have a Khatam Sofer. He says, "Umash Shalom Yesh Lamer Kedusha Mashiach Tzibur Kishayachim Itfal Imoy Zehu Iker Tefillah B'Tzibur." When one person is davening with the Shiach Tzibur out loud, Shiach Tzibur is davening out loud, and he's davening with him, that is considered Tefillah B'Tzibur the best way. Because when everyone's davening by themselves, Mikra Tefillah is Yachid. It's one person. But when one person is davening for others, the Chazan, Sheikh Tzibur, then is considered a Tzibur davening. And he says, and it's only because it's not possible for everyone to daven together out loud that they pray everyone alone. And that's why it really would have been appropriate that they recite with the Chazan word for word, which would have been the real Tefillah B'Tzibur. So the Khatam Sofer wants to say Tefillah B'Tzibur is when everyone's davening word for word out loud together, not separately by themselves. We're going to see that Moshe Feinstein is going to argue this. It's not the way we go, but that's what the Khatam Sofer wants to sort of say. Yes, Malkiel, you had a question?
Yes, so if he comes late, he knows he's not going to make it. Let's say he wants to wait till the Chazan starts and then read it. What if the Chazan reads too fast? And he won't be able to make it. They're going to go to Tachanun or whatever. He's going to miss the next prayer, Ma'arif even. So can you have Shomea Bekoneh with the Chazan or no? Just listen to Nagdishach, which is in the middle of another blessing.
Yeah, we do have such a principle. We do have such a principle of listening is like saying. And we do use that if we're somewhere else in the middle of the Shemoneh Esrei. We're talking now, ideally, of how they be considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. So, yes, if a person starts Shemoneh Esrei and then the Chazan gets too fast for him and he has to daven in his stat and his pace, then that's what he does. But it's not going to be considered Tefillah B'Tzibur, all that whole Shemoneh Esrei. It actually will be because he started with them. We're going to see that he doesn't have to actually end with them. As long as he started when they started, is going to be considered Tefillah B'Tzibur, and then you'll do those halachot because you need that time. Okay, fine. Now the Igros Moshe, he says, we're just going to look at the bold part. He says, "Sharei kol dvarim elu u'lecharei divrei ta'ut." The whole thing that the Khatam Sofer is saying, one huge mistake. How can you say the real Tefillah B'Tzibur is when the Chazan is saying it out loud? That is not Tefillah B'Tzibur. The whole reason why we have allowed Shemoneh Esrei is because some people don't know how to daven, so the Chazan says it aloud for them. When everyone is bucky, everyone knows how to daven. We had a question to the Chachamim why we still need the repetition, because everybody knows how to daven now. So how could the Khatam Sofer We had a question. They asked the Chachamim, why we need Shemonei Esrei now? Everyone knows how to daven. Tom Sofer comes and says, no, when the Chazan is saying Shemonei Esrei, this is the real tefillah of Tzibur. You cannot say that. That's what he pretty much goes through over here in the Igros Moshe from Moshe Feinstein. I just want to mention, I've seen in different svarim, different opinions of really of what the Chazaras Hashatz is doing, what their petition is doing. It seems from a Talmudical standpoint, from a halachic standpoint, that Shemonei Esrei repetition is really to help those who haven't davened yet or don't know how to daven to be yotzet tefillah. However, from a Kabbalistic standpoint, right, from our Kabbalah svarim, it seems to be that the tefillah of Chazarat Hashatz is doing more than just helping those who didn't know how to daven. It actually is much more powerful prayer that goes straight up. Not like our tefillah yachid, everyone has to daven quietly in this week. We're scared to say it out loud. According to the Zohar, we saw that a person shouldn't even allow his words of tefillah to be heard. Although we say la'alacha, you should hear what you're davening. But according to the Zohar, you shouldn't. It can't. Doesn't have that power to be heard when it's on earth. But when it comes to the Chazan, he has a certain power that he can say everything out loud. So it's really how you look at it from a Kabbalistic standpoint versus a Talmudical standpoint. Now, he brings from the Shevet HaLevi, and the Shevet HaLevi wants to say there are two tefillah b'tzibur. And he says, first he says Mechila to Rav Moshe Feinstein. Then he says, and you look in the bold, the second bold part, he says, I read the Ika base Gidre Avodas Tzibur. There's two types of praying in a Tzibur. Hainu, one, carbon avor kol hatzibur, one carbon for everybody. And then when everyone is doing their work together. So the same thing is true with Indian tefillah. So he says there are two types of tzibur. There's a tzibur when everyone's doing something together, a communal doing. Everyone's doing something together. And then there's another tefillah b'tzibur, is when one is doing it for many. That's why I told you there from the beginning. I told you there's two types of tefillah b'tzibur. You have the first tefillah b'tzibur, which is the real type of tefillah b'tzibur, and 10 people are davening Shemonei Esrei at the same time, or 6 in our cases when we don't have 10. It's a minimum, but 6 people are davening together at the same time. And the second status of tefillah b'tzibur is when one person is saying it out loud for everyone. Then he says in the third bold on page 211, he says this is the first level of communal prayer when one is doing it for others, and therefore that's what he was saying. And he's not choilik, he's not making a machoikas here of which one is more better than the other. He's just saying in practice there's two types of tefillah b'tzibur. So reading the orange box, according to the Shevet HaLevi, understanding Chatam Sofer, there are two types of communal service, and both the silent Shemonei Esrei with the minyan and Chazaras Hashatz are considered tefillah b'tzibur. The first is the type where individuals perform their own service at the same time. That's the silent Shemonei Esrei. The second is the time where one performs a service for everyone. It is preferable to recite Shemonei Esrei in the manner that the Chachamim told us, that everyone prays together. But if a person arrives late and can no longer do so, then according to the Chatam Sofer, he's still doing tefillah b'tzibur when he's praying together with the Hazan, which is the second method of tefillah b'tzibur. Yalkut Yosef says, Yochid, hamitpal tefillah Shemonei Esrei b'lachash im hazarat hashliach tzibur nechshevet tefilato ketfilah b'tzibur. So when one person is praying, when the Hazan is praying out loud, he's praying together as a tzibur, as a whole group. She'ikar tzibur hu al tfilat Shemonei Esrei. The whole ikar tefillah is Shemonei Esrei. And he says over here from Tfilat Kehilchata, a couple of advices over here. When you're saying Shemonei Esrei together with the Hazan, you should say the Nagdishach out loud. The Chazan needs to say the Nagdishach out loud. So this is something the Chazanim have to know. Malkiel, we know this, right? When we go up to be Hazan, we have to make sure that we say the Nagdishach, Na'aritzach, every word clearly, that everyone can hear it. The person who's davening with us, he can say it word for word. And the person who's stuck in some other bracha, he needs to hear the Hazan say it in order for Shomea Ka'ona, right, should apply. Because if the Chazan mumbles it or he doesn't say one part, he cannot do it together. It's not considered as if he said Nagdishach. So that's what the Tefillah Kechatah says first. Make sure the Chazan says everything out loud. During the Kedusha, the individual praying should raise his feet from his place. He should say the bracha of Kedusha for Ashkenazim door by door as the Chazan. When it comes to Birkat Kohanim, what does he do during Birkat Kohanim? He's praying with the Chazan now. What does he do? Does he say the bracha? Does he say Yivarechecha with the Chazan, or he doesn't?
Do we respond amen or no? At this point?
Or does he respond amen?
Or we just
What do
silent?
you do? We're gonna take a look. I think I brought it down over here. Let's look on the Alka Joseph on that.
And
Okay, if he's in
another
a
thing-
nenu, he's gonna say it in his own prayer, not in the own bracha. Is this Siman?
After what I'm included with the Chazan. Let's say he started saying Kaddish and I'm at Tzalach Lanu. If he says
Yeah.
Kaddish, am I still Yotze with the Chazan or no?
Say again.
Let's say Chazan is already finishing the Chazara, and I'm at the
Okay.
point Tzalach Lanu Avinu Ki Chatanu. I'm at that point. Let's say and he
He's
starts
already finished with Shemonei Esrei, but you're up to Slach Lanu.
right, and he's at Kaddish already. Am I still included in the prayer with the Tzibur or no?
Yes, as long as you started together with the Tzibur, it's considered a Tzibur. So this goes two ways. Way from I understand it. I think I understand it correctly. If it's during the silent Shemonei Esrei, if you start at any point during the people's silent Shemonei Esrei, that is considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. If you're starting with the Hazan, then you have to start the same time with the Hazan. That's the way I learned up the Sugya. I had someone once argue with me, and he said that even if you start in some point when the Chazan is doing the repetition, that's also considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. So like he's up to Sim Shalom, right? He's at the end of Shemoneh Esrei, he's up to Sim Shalom, and I'm starting when I say V'tai Tiftach. According to those who understand the Sugya that way, they say that's also considered Tefillah B'Tzibur because you started when he was in the middle of Tefillah B'Tzibur. From the way I learned it, I didn't see it that way. I saw it either during the Silent Shemoneh Esrei, anytime you start then, and if it's the loud Shemoneh Esrei, you have to start with the Hazan.
Because I remember
Okay.
once you mentioned something that you have to finish at least majority of the Shemoneh Esrei to be included in the Chazara majority.
To start Shemoneh Esrei, you need to have it. So hold on, let me see over here. This maybe I meant 272 over here. 272 is Reish Ayin bit. Yeah, okay, he says over here. Yeah, so this is the book I wanted. V'yesh Ayrim shel Enim Tefillah Tzibur im etchit Tefillah Tol Kashat Tzibur be'emtza Kol shel Ikra Tzibur Ragleim Oiskim Tefillah Yocha V'Tpal Imohem Have a Tefillah B'Tzibur. That's what I said, right? At any time they're in the silent Shemoneh Esrei, they're up to Sim Shalom, silent Shemoneh Esrei, and I start my Shemoneh Esrei, whether they're in the end of their silent Shemoneh Esrei, that's still considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. But some say this is not considered Tefillah B'Tzibur. Mamash, just something like it. He said part of it Tefillah in Matzibur. If you're starting together with the Chazara, with the Shliach Tzibur, if you finish the bracha before the Shliach Tzibur, okay, you're trying to pray together with the Shliach Tzibur. The Shliach Tzibur is a little slower than you. You say Baruch Hashem, that, right? You say whatever bracha you said, and then he says it after you. You don't answer amen. It's a hefset. Aval kamishitpalel im Shliach Tzibur ve'agil kedusha. Aimer matzibur kol nusach kedusha. You say the whole nagdishach. Although you can't enter amen to brachos, you say nagdishach together word for word, like we've been saying. Now, this is your question, Rav Avram Chaimov. He said, "Urvikaz kohanim yazin ve'yishma habracha me'akohanim ve'ya'aneh acharehem amen." And then he can answer amen after the kohanim's bracha. That's what he says. I'm reading it. You stop, you listen to them say the bracha, Vishma bracha mekonim, Vayane achareim amen. That's what he says after the bracha. Yeah. Yep.
After each stanza?
No, he says after the bracha.
Vikuneka and Shalom?
So he's up to Yivrecha Hashem Yishmerecha, right?
Right.
So he says, he's Birkat Kohanim. You're davening word for word.
Right.
Tov Shemchan L'chana Ele Hadot. Kohanim, they say, Bekushato Shel Aaron V'tzivanu Levarech Et Amo Yisrael B'Ahava. He says to that, you can answer Amen.
So
I'm reading it again.
Amenim, we say 3 Amenim.
It doesn't say about the 3 Amenim. He says that one Amen. At least the way I'm understanding it. I'm reading Tzibur Kedusha. U'Birkat Kohanim Yazin Ve'Yishma Bracha MeKohanim Vayane Achareim Amen. And he answers after them Amen. That's all he wrote here. I don't know any more than that.
I usually don't say it at all. Not the shy, I respond.
Say what?
I usually do not respond. I usually
right. I do just like you. I don't respond to anything there.
Nagdisha, I do respond.
Right.
But Kohanim, I do not.
Right. Same here. I think we all with the same idea. It's I don't know. It feels more appropriate not to answer. But you feel like you're making a hefsek in Shemonei Esrei.
Correct.
I'm not. Yes, you should answer Amen, but only after the bracha, not after.
Who says this? Who says this?
This is the Yalkut Yosef Simon Tzadik Sif Tet, page 272 in the new edition of the Yalkut Yosef. Then he says over here, when you daven Shemonei Esrei, word to word to Shev Tzibur, when you get to Modim, you say Modim, the regular Modim, not Modim the Rabbanim. Okay. And then he brings down from Shem Zaman Orach, what we mentioned already. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else I wanted to bring down, because before I had something I wanted to say. 16, 17, and 20. 16 is what? This one we already brought down. The person started davening before, and then the tzibur started davening. Is that considered tefillah b'tzibur or not? Like I said, I started davening before the 10 people started davening together, and then they started. Am I considered tefillah b'tzibur or not? So at some point we're together. It is considered. It says don't do it, but if you did do it, it is still considered tefillah b'tzibur. Fine. That was this one. 16, 17, and then 20. Yeah, that one we brought down as well. Okay. So what did we get through so far to come out l'alacha l'masa for us, Sephardim? Right? Hey, if you're coming in late and you see that the Chazan didn't start yet, you should start Shemonei Esrei with the Chazan word for word, ideally for the whole Shemonei Esrei. You must make sure Nagdishach is said word for word to Chazan. Modim also should preferably be said with the Chazan together, word for word. The rest of the berachot, it's up to you. But you don't answer Amen to the Chazan. Anenu, you would do the one privately in the Yachid. Coming to Kohanim, we saw the Akadot says you can answer to the Kohanim after their bracha, Amen. Okay. If you're praying the short Shemonei Esrei, I think that's going to be the next sugya already. Yeah, the short Shemonei Esrei out loud, that's going to be the next sugya. That's going to be 2:14. Oh, we already have time. Okay.
Moshe, usually during Kaddish, when it's being said, is it allowed to continue reading Shemonei Esrei, or it's better to stop? Just be silent and think about Amen.
For the 5 amens, right?
Correct.
What do people do? No, Rav Yosef, what do you do? You're middle of Shemonei Esrei and they're after doing Kaddish Titkabah. Do you continue to daven, or you keep quiet to listen to the Kaddish?
Just silently, you think of the word Amen, but you cannot pronounce it.
First 5 amens, you keep quiet and then you go. I don't know offhand. I don't know. What do you do, Avram?
I usually read.
You read, yeah. I think most people do that. I don't know if that's the right thing, but I think most people do that, but I'm not sure. We have to look it up. Yeah, just continue Shemonei Esrei and not wait for the Zay Kaddish or not.
I think I
have
heard.
to do it also with your kavanah. you're going to stop and wait, and it takes away from your kavanah, then you probably have enough reason to continue davening and not pay attention to it.
I think I heard that it's best to be silent. Do not respond to amen. Just think of amen in your mind. Think of it, but do not respond. And then continue.
All right. Next week we'll finish up this year, the short Shemonei Esrei. We talked about it, but just to go a little bit more into it. All right. Toda raba. Shavua tov l'kulam. Thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. God bless.